This is a video about anxiety. Now, anxiety is something that a lot of people have difficulties with, but it is a thing you can do something about. So let's start by asking, what is anxiety? Anxiety is in the fear family of emotions. It's not the fear we would feel if we suddenly came across a fierce animal about to bite or harm us. It's more like the fear we get if we expect a danger to arrive, not now, but any minute. It's not an enjoyable feeling at all. It's normal for everyone to feel anxiety now and then, but for some people it can become a constant or overwhelming feeling, and this can be very uncomfortable. So why do we have anxiety? Well, like fear, anxiety is about keeping us safe. You see, we evolved fear to give us an extra burst of energy so that we could run away from any immediate dangers. And we evolved anxiety for when the threat of danger was not so immediate. You see, anxiety puts us on edge so that we can be alert to any possible dangers that might turn up. So although anxiety and fear are related, there are some differences because we evolved them to do slightly different jobs. We evolved fear to trigger a response in our body that meant we had more energy available to fight, run away, or occasionally it triggered us to freeze, until the danger had gone. This response is triggered by a hormone called adrenaline. Years ago, anxiety would have had the job of making us super alert to anything out of the ordinary if we felt like we or our tribe were at risk from a danger that was not right in front of us now, like the possibility of being attacked at some point by another tribe, for example. For this response, our body releases a different hormone called glucocortisol. You can also see from this why fear usually lasts a short amount of time and why anxiety can last longer. So why do we still feel anxious when most days we are very unlikely to encounter a real danger that would actually harm us? Unfortunately, our brains and bodies cannot tell the difference between a threat of real danger and something that just scares us because our minds tell us that it's scary. These pretend dangers can include things like walking into a room of strangers, going to the dentist or doctors, having an exam, moving house or school, doing something that we've never done before, or even being far too busy and feeling overwhelmed. The so-called dangers we fear now are not actually a threat to our safety, but they're things that we can still be scared of, like making a fool out of ourselves in front of other people, messing up or making mistakes, disappointing someone we care about, not being able to be certain about how something is going to turn out, thinking we won't be able to cope, or many disasters actually happening and everything going wrong, even if this is not actually likely. So how does our body react to feeling anxiety? Well, there's lots of different physical symptoms and different people will experience slightly different symptoms. When we feel anxious, we tend to have quick and shallow breathing. We can feel tense, like our muscles are tight and the opposite of relaxed. Our heart can beat quickly. We can have a shaky voice. Our face might go red. We can sweat more than usual. We can be fidgety, jumpy and restless, and sometimes it can make our stomach unsettled and give us a tummy ache. Some people develop a fear of the actual symptoms of anxiety. Although they are not pleasant to feel, they won't do you any harm. They're there to keep you safe, not harm you. Some people become scared of others noticing their symptoms of anxiety, like if they go red in the face. Mostly people don't notice, and if they do, they are either likely to be concerned or really not think very much about it at all. Besides, does it really matter if somebody notices? Some people become scared of actually feeling anxious and will try and avoid situations where they might feel it. So when we feel anxious, what does it tend to make us do? Well, a lot of the things that anxiety tends to make us do goes back to why we evolved it thousands of years ago. You see, anxiety's job was to make us alert to a danger that could turn up any minute, and we were uncertain when or whether it would actually turn up. When we feel anxious, there are lots of things we tend to do, and we might do some more than others. When we have anxiety, we can have a non-stop feeling of dread. It can put us on edge. Because we're wired up to expect danger, we can start to look for or sense danger where it often turns out there isn't any at all. It can prevent us from sleeping well. It can stop us concentrating on tasks that we need to get done because we feel distracted. And generally, we usually can't settle and we feel agitated. Can you see how these behaviours could have kept someone safe if they were living in a tribe thousands of years ago that was expecting another tribe to attack any moment? But rarely are we under threat of real danger nowadays. But anything we feel nervous about in the future, because we can't be certain about how it's going to turn out, can trigger anxiety. Other things that anxiety can make us do when we're someone who struggles with it include trying hard to avoid the things that make you anxious, procrastinating, which means finding ways of avoiding getting on with what you need to be getting on with. The tenseness you feel can make you bite your nails, bite your lip, or make you raise your shoulders. It can mean you end up doing things that make you feel more in control, like being obsessively tidy or bossing people about. It can make you tired because it's exhausting. Two further things we also tend to do when we feel anxious are to ruminate and catastrophize. Rumination is where we think about what is making us anxious over and over again. We do this because anxiety wants to keep us focused on whatever it is we think is scary, which our brains mistake for danger, so that we can be ready for it when it comes along. However, the reality is, because what is scaring us is not actually dangerous, we don't need to be this focused. Rumination is simply not helpful, and it can make us stay anxious. Catastrophizing is where we start to believe that everything that could go wrong will go wrong. We do this to alert ourselves to possible dangers, but instead, in modern life, it just fills us with worries, doubts and dread and makes us feel awful. Neither catastrophizing or ruminating help us in a life where we hardly ever encounter real dangers that we have no control over. There is a general belief that anxiety has increased in recent years, even though real danger is not generally a day-to-day thing. Let's take a look at why this might be the case. We talk about it more now. People didn't used to speak about anxiety very much. If people didn't speak about it, they were less likely to notice it or tell other people that they were feeling it. People still experienced anxiety and expected to feel it, but they tended not to state that they were feeling it. Now anxiety has a name that's used to describe it, we hear about it more often. This definitely makes some people think there's more of it around now, and there might well be, but talking about it more could give some people an exaggerated idea of how much it has increased in recent years. Social media. Lots of research tells us social media doesn't make us very happy. There are a few reasons for this. 1. People tend to post happy pictures from their lives, so we can end up comparing our lives with what we see they're doing, and it can make us feel jealous or dissatisfied. 2. Social media can tell us very quickly, just by scrolling with our finger, about many injustices and terrible things happening in the world, and this can leave us feeling deeply unsettled. 3. Some people are really unkind on social media, more so than they would be if they were talking to someone face to face. And 4. Each time we click on something on social media or we get a like, we release a hormone called dopamine into our blood. Dopamine is our reward hormone, and it gives us a little buzz of pleasure when it's released. Dopamine drives us to keep searching out things that release it to get this little reward buzz. So dopamine sounds like a good thing, right? Well, not exactly. Dopamine makes us do things again and again because of the reward buzz. Dopamine is why we can become so addicted to social media, or anything else for that matter. We originally evolved it, so we searched out things that could be of benefit to us, but it doesn't actually know what is good for us. It just drives us to search for and repeat things that release it. This can mean it can encourage us to do things we know are not good for us, like eating a whole chocolate cake, for example. Social media wants us to keep clicking, as the people who own it can sell the data our clicking gives them. That's why it tries to entice us to keep us tuned in with clickbait. The more we click, the more dopamine we get, the more we want to get. One way of thinking about dopamine is knowing that we would release it if we won the lottery. Imagine trying to sleep that night. Dopamine can actually unsettle us. So social media can make us feel stressed, unhappy and unsettled, and it can certainly make us feel more anxious. Another reason that's been suggested for why people are more anxious is the idea that many parents care more attentively for their children now than our grandparents' generation did. This can mean parents are solving their children's problems almost before any problem has arisen. This means that children don't get to solve their own problems and see that they can actually cope and rely upon themselves when things go wrong. When children make decisions on their own, when they make mistakes that they have to sort out themselves, and when they feel what it's like to be rejected and survive, this teaches them that they can cope. When we feel we can cope, we're less anxious. We do tend to be wiser and better at sorting things out than we think we are. So anxiety can cause us a lot of bother. So what can we do about it? It's a good idea to think about anxiety as an indicator that something needs sorting and a sign that we need to do something. Consider what anxiety might be trying to teach us, whether we need to change something, whether we need to think about something in a different way, if we need to learn something, whether we need to understand something, or to sort something that's causing us emotional pain. So what helps with anxiety? Well, one of the first things to consider is how we feel and think about ourselves, which is called self-esteem. If we don't think we're very good at anything, or we don't trust ourselves to do well, this can increase our anxiety because we will assume that we're going to fail and we will assume that we won't cope. One of the ways of developing self-esteem is to be kinder to ourselves. Here are some tips on this. Consider the voice in your head. We all have one. Research shows that it tends to be critical and negative. This is because for survival reasons, thousands of years ago, it paid to notice bad things like where the poisonous snakes hung out. However, it's not so helpful now. Listen to the voice or thoughts inside your head. It can say some really quite horrible things like, "You're really stupid. That was a stupid thing to do." It could say, "They don't like you when you meet new people," or "You're no good at that when you try something new." The best thing for the negative voice in your head is to notice it, thank it, and then state, "No thank you," but this takes some practice and determination. Think about what you do and think when you make a mistake. Does the voice in your head tell you off or tell you that you're useless? Does the voice make you feel like you're really rubbish when you make mistakes? The mistake voice is one to look out for, as it can stop you realising that mistakes can be really valuable as they teach us things, and quickly. The voice is also not very forgiving, and it forgets to make it clear that absolutely everyone makes mistakes. Also consider if you aim for perfection when you do something. Aiming for perfection can trigger anxiety, as it sets such a high standard you're far more likely to think you've failed. If you believe you never do things as well as you feel you should, it's going to be hard to feel good about yourself. In most situations, good enough will do, and when you want to do something really well and put more effort in, aim for good, but never aim for perfection, as it cannot be achieved. Nothing is ever perfect, and it's good to accept this. If you're someone who aims for perfection, you need to ask yourself what thoughts drive you to do this, as they're really not helpful. Do you think people will think so much less of you if you make a mistake or do something less than perfectly? Research has shown that if we do something silly or get in a muddle, as long as we can laugh about it, people tend to like us all the better for it. Another thing that's good for our self-esteem is to never compare ourselves with others. There will always be people better at some things and worse at other things than we are. We can feel bad about ourselves if we think of everything as a competition. It's better to celebrate our differences and aim to connect with other people. And one way we can certainly do this is to admire what they're good at. It's better to connect with others rather than compete with them. Another thing that's good for our self-esteem is practicing gratitude. Regularly reminding yourself of what you're grateful for can make you feel better about yourself and help you think more positively. Both of these things will help with anxiety. Why not make a poster of all the things you're grateful for and put it on the wall by your bed? A self-esteem booster can be to imagine yourself through the eyes of someone who really loves you or likes you. What kind of things would a friend or relative say about you? When you're not feeling great about yourself, remember these things. Now let's take a look at some other things that can help with anxiety. Now, because anxiety is a feeling, and it's hard to change a feeling just by thinking about what we're feeling, we need to know that to help with anxiety, we often need to change our thoughts and our behaviour. It's best just to accept anxiety as a background feeling while you're working on your thoughts and your behaviour. Never panic about the feeling itself, just accept it when it's there. So let's have a look at some thoughts and thinking that can help with anxiety. Anxiety can be triggered by our thoughts, so how can we train our brains to think in ways that will reduce our anxiety? The first useful thing to know is that anxiety will make us look hard for evidence of danger and expect it. In our modern lives, this makes us catastrophise. This will mean that while we're anxious, we're very likely to find other things that we can easily also feel anxious about. It helps to be aware that this is what your brain is doing when you're suffering with anxiety. When your brain searches for something else that you will assume will be another disaster for you to feel anxious about, notice it and say no thank you or stop that. Remember, most of the time we are completely safe. A lot of our anxiety is triggered by not trusting that things will turn out well, partly because we can never know what will happen in the future, and partly because we might doubt our ability to cope or do well. Most things do actually turn out okay, and even when they don't, we nearly always manage to cope with whatever goes wrong. When you feel anxious, you need to remind yourself that you will be able to handle whatever happens. Another helpful approach is to remind yourself of the times in the past when you felt anxious and how you coped. Chances are you did cope. You could also think about what helped you to cope. It can also help to ask yourself what's the worst thing that could actually happen, and ask if it would be that terrible. If you think you could not face the worst thing, then you need to think what would help you cope with it. It can sometimes really help if we can get to the point of laughing at ourselves for how seriously we're taking everything. Quite often, people who suffer a lot with anxiety are people who like to be in control of their lives as much as possible. And what's more, the more anxious they feel, the more they might try to control things. The reality is, nobody can be in complete control of their lives, and it helps to fully understand, accept, and be comfortable with this. The fact that life is ultimately uncontrollable makes it interesting. Imagine how bored we would be if we knew exactly what was going to happen every day. If you are anxious about a particular situation or event that's coming up, it can help to imagine the situation and consider how you are seeing the event in your head, what you are thinking about the event, and what the voice in your head is saying to you about it. Challenge any negative thoughts you have. Imagine if the event went brilliantly. It can help to imagine that happening. Play through the event in your head where you are confident and everything goes really well. Anxiety can make you behave in ways that continue to make you feel anxious. It makes sense, therefore, that some changes in behaviour can help with anxiety. Let's take a look at some of these. People with anxiety often avoid the things that trigger their anxiety. This seems like a good short-term solution, but it ultimately makes anxiety worse. It means that the thing you avoid will always trigger anxiety. Your brain has an emotional memory that will get stronger and stronger if you keep attaching anxiety to something. Your brain will continue to assume that the thing is truly scary unless you face it and show it that you can cope and that it's not actually scary at all. Rather than worrying all the time or randomly, some people find it helpful to put some time aside to do some serious worrying about the things that they are feeling anxious about. You could list all of the things, but once the time is over, it's important that you stop thinking about your list. Quite often when people are struggling with anxiety, they look to others constantly for comfort and reassurance. By this, I don't mean talking worries through with someone. That's nearly always a good thing to do. What I mean is about hoping someone else can wave a magic wand and make everything feel okay. Other people are very unlikely to be able to magic your anxiety away. Even if they help you with the thing that is triggering your anxiety, you are still likely to be anxious about another thing if you never learn to cope with your anxiety yourself. It's a good idea to learn to trust yourself as the most likely person who will manage to do something about your anxiety by changing your thoughts and your behaviour. Anxiety can make us procrastinate. This means we put off doing the things we need to do. This is partly because anxiety makes it hard to concentrate. We're focusing on looking out for danger, remember? And partly because if we don't do something, we can't be judged or get them wrong. Procrastinating means we don't get things done, and this can make us feel even more anxious. When you catch yourself procrastinating, you need to tell yourself, just do it. We can feel anxiety when we have more things going on than we think we can cope with. This can make us feel overwhelmed. When this happens, it's really important to write a list of everything we need to do or think about. This can make us feel like we have downloaded our brain. And of course there are things you can do that will soothe and relax you. These things will help tell your mind and body that they are not in danger, and they can reduce anxiety. They tend to be things that are good for you anyway, not just for reducing anxiety. Meditation reduces anxiety. It has an effect that builds up over time the more you do it. You can do a body scan to help you relax. Focus on each part of the body, starting with your feet, and relax the muscles as you scan up your body. Focusing on breathing can relax you, especially if you take less time to breathe in than you take to breathe out. You could breathe in to the count of 4 and out to the count of 5. Finding sensations to comfort yourself, such as massaging your feet, stroking a pet, playing soothing music, or even staring at the clouds. Practice mindfulness by using all of your 5 senses to really notice something that you're doing, like eating an apple, to really take you into the moment. Eating well. Research shows that a diet with plenty of fruit and veg reduces anxiety. And exercise. Exercise is great for regulating emotions as well as general health. Often anxiety means people struggle to sleep at night. People suffering with anxiety can find themselves awake at night with their heads whirring around, worrying about absolutely everything they can find to worry about. When this happens, there are different things you can try to help you get back to sleep. These include getting up until you feel sleepy again. The act of getting up often stops the rumination. If you feel wide awake, try reading a book. Write a list to empty out the thoughts in your head. Do a body scan for relaxation. Try focusing on your breathing. You could try hypnosis. There are plenty of relaxation sessions on YouTube. Try creating a boring list in your head, such as many countries that begin with A, then B, and so on. Use this same list every night so that it becomes more and more boring. Do a mental tour of your childhood home, if it's different from where you live now. Remember the sequence of events on a holiday that you've been on. Use the same holiday each night so it becomes increasingly boring. Repeat a mantra in time to your breath. I will be okay, or I am safe and warm and ready to sleep. So what have we learned? Well, we've learnt that anxiety is in the fear family of emotions and that it's not enjoyable at all. We've learnt that anxiety can be triggered when we expect something to go wrong and this feels scary to us. And we've learnt that we can get much better at dealing with anxiety by changing our thoughts and our behaviours.